Truth Corey's stories. My husband sent me a picture of him and his mistress doing shots on a beach in Phuket, Thailand. The caption read, "Living the high life." Okay. I was sitting in a sterile beige hospital room in Scottsdale, Arizona, watching my mother-in-law, who was paralyzed from the neck down after a fall, drool onto her pillow. He, his father, and his sister had left her. They told the doctors they had an unavoidable business emergency and left me to handle everything. The truth was, they were at a resort party paid for by the mistress's fraudulent cosmetics company. The audacity was breathtaking. I was the one fielding calls from debt collectors about the mounting medical bills, the one learning how to clear a feeding tube, while they were posting selfies with elephants. For weeks, I just stewed in this righteous anger. I felt so completely alone, so betrayed. Then, one night, as I was changing her IV drip, I felt a faint pressure on my hand. I froze. I looked down, and my mother-in-law's fingers, which hadn't moved in months, were twitching around mine. Her eyes, usually vacant, were sharp, focused. A raspy whisper escaped her lips. "He left me." Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of a building storm. "I know," I whispered back. "They all did." She squeezed my hand harder. "Good," she rasped. "Now we can begin." That night, she told me everything. The story wasn't just about my husband's affair. It was a web of lies going back decades. She confessed that my husband, Mark, and his sister, Chloe, weren't her biological children. She'd been infertile, and my father-in-law, a monster named Richard, had been obsessed with having heirs to control his family's construction empire. So he found a desperate young woman, paid her to carry his children, and then, after they were born, he ruined her, drove her out of the state, and told everyone she had died in a car crash. Then he married my mother-in-law, whose family had old money, and pretended the children were hers. She was a trophy wife and a cover story. She had tried to live the children as her own, but Richard's cruelty poisoned everything. She stayed, enduring his emotional abuse for years because she couldn't bear to leave the kids. But the moment Mark brought his mistress, a tacky influencer named Amber, to a family dinner, and Chloe gushed about her amazing fake Dead Sea mud masks, something inside her snapped. The fall in the bathroom a week later was a moment of weakness, of despair. But being abandoned by them, that was a bucket of ice water. It didn't break her. It forged her into steel. "They won't be back from Thailand for another 5 days, she said, her voice growing stronger with every word. "That gives us a head start. Get me out of here. It's time to burn it all down." I smuggled her out of the hospital that night. At home, she directed me to a hidden safe behind a landscape painting in her study. Inside was a thick file folder. It was her weapon. It was all the proof. Financial records of Richard funneling her inheritance into his failing projects, the original private investigator's report on the birth mother, and crucially, evidence that Amber's best-selling B Cosmetics Dead Sea Mud was actually cheap industrial clay from a supplier in China laced with chemical fragrances. Her instructions were precise. First, I called an investigative journalist she knew, a real shark. I met him at a coffee shop and laid out the B Cosmetics fraud. When he asked what my connection was, I didn't hesitate. The CEO, Amber, is sleeping with my husband. They left his paralyzed mother in a hospital to go party in Thailand with the profits from this scam. The journalist's eyes lit up. It was a scandal made for prime time. Next, I met with a lawyer, the best divorce attorney in Phoenix. My mother-in-law didn't want a divorce. She wanted an annulment. She presented the evidence that her entire marriage was based on fraud. Richard's lie that his first wife was dead. With the proof that the birth mother was alive and well living in Oregon, the lawyer was confident. An annulment meant the marriage had never legally existed. Richard wouldn't just lose a spouse, he would have to pay back every single cent of her money he had ever touched. He wouldn't just be divorced, he would be erased. The news report aired the night they landed. It was glorious. A special investigation into B Cosmetics featuring lab results, shipping manifest, and a very serious-looking reporter standing in front of Amber's glitzy headquarters. They stormed into the house, tanned and furious. Mark saw his mother sitting in a wheelchair in the living room, and his face went white. "What is she doing here? She should be in the hospital." I just smiled sweetly. "She missed you." The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Chloe, a C-list influencer herself, had her Instagram account suspended for promoting a fraudulent product. Her followers turned on her, a digital mob calling her a scammer and worse. She was facing a class action lawsuit from people who bought the mud masks through her affiliate links. I watched from the kitchen as she and Amber got into a screaming and hair-pulling fight in the foyer. Mark tried to break it up and ended up with a long scratch down his face. My mother-in-law watched from her wheelchair, a tiny, satisfied smile on her face. The news went viral. An anonymous post appeared on a local gossip forum detailing how Mark had abandoned his sick mother. He was suspended from his cushy job at his father's company pending an internal investigation. Amber's business was destroyed. Boycotts, lawsuits, public disgrace. Her name was Mud, and not the expensive kind. They started turning on each other like rats in a trap. Mark blamed Amber for everything. Chloe demanded Amber pay for her legal fees. Richard even tried to demand Amber pay him back for a restaurant investment he'd promised her. It was a symphony of greed and desperation. Then, the final blow, a process server arrived at the door and handed Richard a summons. A petition to annul his 30-year marriage on the grounds of fraud. He stood in the living room, paper shaking in his hand, as my mother-in-law wheeled herself to the center of the room. "It's over, Richard," she said, her voice ringing with power. And for the first time, she stood up from the wheelchair, shaky but upright. Gasps filled the room. "Oh, I've been able to walk for a few days now. I was just waiting for the right moment. And Mark, Chloe, there's someone I'd like you to meet." On cue, the front door opened and a woman who looked to be in her late 50s with Mark's eyes and Chloe's chin walked in. "I'm your mother," she said softly. The chaos that erupted was everything my mother-in-law had planned. Richard stammered, lied, and finally confessed. The children he'd raised as his prize-winning heirs stared at the woman they thought was their mother, then at the stranger who actually was, and then at the father who'd built their entire lives on a lie. Their birth mother looked at her children not with love, but with a cold pity and said, "I'm just glad I can finally erase this entire pathetic family from my life," before turning and walking out, heading back to her real life in America. Chloe collapsed in a sobbing heap. Mark just stood there like a hollowed-out statue. My mother-in-law handed Richard an eviction notice. The house was in her name. It had always been in her name. He was out. He left without a fight, a broken old man with nothing. Our divorce proceedings were filed simultaneously. The judge, having seen the news and the evidence from the annulment case, was not sympathetic to my ex-husband. My mother-in-law, free and wealthy once more, gave me a gift. "A new start," she said. I didn't want $1 million. I just wanted a small bakery. She bought me the perfect little shop downtown. Today, I spend my days covered in flowers, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. It's my happy place. My mother-in-law, she sold that monument to misery in Scottsdale and used her entire fortune to establish a foundation and build a beautiful, sprawling home for foster children. She, who could never have children of her own, is now a mother to 30. She walks with a cane now, but her eyes are bright. Sometimes I bring a van full of kids from the home to my bakery for baking classes. Last week, my mother-in-law sat at a table watching a little girl with pigtails carefully frost a muffin. She handed it to her, and my mother-in-law took a bite. A genuine, joyful smile spreading across her face. Justice, it turns out, tastes a lot like a perfectly baked cupcake. Thank you for joining me today. If you found this story interesting, please like the video and subscribe to the Co-Re's True Stories channel. Thanks again.